Welcome back. So let's see one more scenario, that is Google Map API service. Okay. So right, in every website, maybe in most of the websites, you see Google Map plugin. Okay. So how we are able to get that Google Map plugin in our websites? For example, in Uber, when you use a Uber, you have that Google Map plugin as well. Okay, so it's simple. It's again REST API call. So Google will not expose their code and they give us just to find out the location. They just expose the REST API. So what all that does is, if you want to know any place location, just use our Google Map API, so that Google exposes their map API saying place search. There is one API in Google Map called place search. We will actually use this API to automate in our next lectures. This is one of the very good API for practice purposes. So I'm just theoretically explaining what does this API do. In the coming lectures, let's try to test it manually and automate in our framework as well. Okay. So they released a place search API where we need to just ask in the form of XML or JSON format by passing an input and radius. Okay, input is city name. I don't know. It may be again New York. And radius is an optional one. Just I need to ask where is New York in my XML JSON. That's all. So I do not know what happens in the backend. So when I ask this to place search Google Map API, it go and talks to its own database and gives me the map in the form of response, in the form of XML JSON, showing where exactly it is and what state, what latitudinal, what longitudinal, and weather report. It gives me everything. Okay, so I'm not bothered about how does it gets me. What all I know is there is an Google Maps REST API called place search, and I will use it in my website building by just calling that API, and I ask my location specific. Basically whatever the user inputs. So user inputs will be passed to that API and I get a response. So here we are not at all bothered about how does the Google backend code works. If you want something, we are using their exposed REST APIs and we are installing it or we are fixing it into our application. That's it. So that makes website building is very easy by bringing out whatever the plugins from external third parties. Okay, so here where our testing comes into picture is we will come and test these REST APIs. Like we would send something in the JSON or XML and hit our REST API request. So once we hit, we get a response, right? By talking it to their own backends, and we will validate that response which returned in the form of JSON or XML to make sure whether this REST API is returning correct response or not. Okay, if something wrong in that REST API building, then results will be wrongly sent as the response and this wrong responses were reflected in the application. That's all. Site went for a toss, right? REST APIs should behave properly so that functional flow will be smooth. If there is, because all the business logic layer was written in this middle layer REST APIs. If you are not able to test it, if you are not able to validate that business, then automatically whatever the REST API returns, it displays in application, right? So there's no point in testing application front end. You can test it. Test for buttons, text for flows, text for page breakings. You can do everything from front end. But the data, whatever you are seeing in the front end is maybe coming from REST API. If your architecture have REST APIs built, it's coming from REST API response. So it is our duty to go and validate those REST APIs as well. You will have a complete document which explains. For example, when this weather.com domain exposes their REST APIs, they give a specific format for us. For the input you pass, you would get output in this way. Okay, we need to validate all those fields, what input we are passing and what output we are getting. So all those should be validated. If there are any error in this REST API, so automatically business logic will go wrong and the wrong logic will be displayed in the application. And that cannot be caught from the front end, right? So front end is like UI, but the data, whatever is reflecting in the front end, cannot be guaranteed. It should come from REST APIs. And also, we test one more scenarios, like whatever the response we are getting from REST API. So in our scenario, we thought that 35 degrees Fahrenheit was sent by weather.com server. Okay, the REST API response is 35, and also make sure that in our application also it is reflecting as 35 degrees Fahrenheit, because we are connecting this REST API to our application, right? When developer writing this code in integrating this REST API and application, if you mess up something and if it is wrongly displayed as minus 35 or whatever, but because of some code he written in this integration part, if it is wrongly written, then it's also a problem. So what you need to do is, so it's happening all over the world now. The industry was completely moving to API testing level. Check the response of your API and make sure the response what you got API is the same what is reflecting in the application, because it should pass same response to application, right? So that comparison also you need to do, and there will be definitely errors. In the project what I have done recently 3 weeks back, I got some contracting project, and there I got a REST API response as one number, and when I go to application it displayed with a negative symbol. Just because of the code logic written by that developer, there is no match between the REST response and the response displaying in application. So we need to make sure this scenario as well. So there's still a lot to test. I'll explain you step by step clearly through manual tools, as well as I'll automate it using REST Assured API. We'll build a framework. We'll have a HTML reports. It's all end-to-end framework we would see in the later sections of our course. Okay, I'm just trying to explain how we validate these REST APIs. Okay, so yeah, hopefully you understood how that works in the backend with these scenarios. But still, don't worry. In every lecture, when we take one practical example, you will get clear idea on what exactly these are. It's okay if you get at least 50% of knowledge on what's happening at the backend. Again, when we go through our lectures and when we do some practical examples and when we start testing it, you will have very clear idea. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much about the basic introduction. So in the next lecture, let's try to understand what are the characteristic features of REST API, and then we'll quickly jump to our actual testing. Okay, so this basic theory is more than enough for you to kickstart the actual testing. So let's try to understand what are these characteristic features and what are the examples in the real world. Okay, thank you.